hopefully they'll join us. Roll call, to my left.
Bilal Hussein.
Ed Barra.
Maureen Hopkins.
Tim DeRoche.
Andrea Westby.
Thank you. First item of business is the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, could I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor of the minutes as presented? Thank you. Well, the next order of business is election of a planning board chair and vice chair. I sit here as the temporary chair, having been put here in January. So I guess it's my job to call for nominations for a chair.
I would nominate Ed Bear for chair.
A second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? No? All in favor of Mr. Bearer? Okay. The next item of business is the nomination and election of a vice chair. Do I have any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Maureen Hopkins for vice chair.
A second.
Very good. Any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations? No? Seeing none? Maureen, are you prepared to serve? All in favor of Maureen being our vice chair? Very good. All right. Next item of business, and we work from a prepared agenda for those who are joining us or those who are watching from home. The first item of business is continued public hearing, site plan review, subdivision review, and I believe special exception review of 15 Academy Street, application by Goral Palmer on behalf of Auburn Town Center Apartments, LLC, for final approval of construction of a 53-unit residential development. This property is located in the traditional downtown neighborhood, T-4.2 district, and will be reviewed under Chapter 60, Article 16, Division 2, Site Plan Review, Division 3, Special Exception, and Division 4, Subdivision. I think that we'll hear first from staff, can bring us up to speed on where this application stands, and then we'll hear from the applicant.
Yes, so the application was last brought to the planning board for the public hearing on January 13th. The board decided to continue the public hearing for the applicant to respond to the requirements under special exception. There are a few provisions in the ordinance under form-based code that would require an application to be reviewed under special exception, and that was the size requirement of the building and development. So since that meeting, the applicant has prepared responses to those conditions in the ordinance. I do want to remind the board this received preliminary approval December 9th, 2025. So in accordance with section 601362, within 30 days after the public hearing, the board needs to vote on the final plan. If the final plan is not voted on at the public hearing, there has to be an agreed upon timeline by both the applicant and the planning board. So that's the reason why this has been continued, for the applicant to have time to respond to the requirements in special exception. We are recommending that the board vote on the final application at tonight's meeting.
Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? I just had one observation before you begin, Caleb. I thought it was, at the last meeting, it was clear. I went back and watched the tape. Maybe it wasn't as clear as in my mind it was, but I would have expected something in the form of a letter demonstrating your client's financial capacity beyond what we have in the file, which I think, I know Mr. DeRoche and I both were concerned about the really lack of any evidence of financial capacity. So either you need to be prepared to address that somehow or explain to us how that letter satisfies that standard.
Sure.
You don't have to do it at the beginning, but at some point before we vote. Go ahead.
Yep. So for the record, Caleb Brasser with Goral Palmer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So just to kind of reiterate what we have provided for you here, we were last before you in January and left with some additional information needed for the special exception standards. So we've since reviewed with staff, provided some information here in this updated response package. So there were several ways in which a project could trigger a special exception. As we had reviewed, one would have been within the form-based code, a specific use might be designated as needing a special exception. That wasn't the case for us. What was the case for us was that we were doing two things. One was the building had a total square footage, including all floors, over 12,000 square feet, which we do have. And then the second was that we were requesting a waiver and within the form-based code. So of course we've talked about the waivers that we had, and we actually had voted and the board had approved at that last meeting our one waiver for the building length along our frontage. But in general, I just wanted to go through here. I think really in summary, what we discussed at last meeting are same kind of feelings and findings that a lot of this information that I'm providing here to demonstrate the special exception standards and our compliance with those is a lot of the same material that we've already provided and just kind of reformulated to meet some of these. So a lot of items on safety, compliance with general traffic patterns, master planning elements, and elements with city services, character with the neighborhood. A lot of those things we can certainly touch on if the board has any questions, but I think certainly we provide a lot of evidence between site plan, subdivision, specific standards with the form-based code. So I'm feeling confident that we're certainly meeting those. That was generally what I had for my presentation here. Now, the applicant he is here with me tonight as well and can speak to some of the financial capacity elements, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, there. And so applicant's been working with staff and is ready to discuss some of those elements with you this evening. But with that, I know we still have the public hearing open, so I'll end my my presentation for you all. Certainly, if you have any questions for me specifically, happy to answer, but we'll just leave it and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant before we move to the public hearing stage? Does your client want to address the board before we move to the public hearing stage?
Your purview, whether you prefer now or with public.
Sure. I think now would be good, right?
Hey, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Matt Leonard. You've heard my name as part of the development project manager. In reference to the financial capacity letter, there's been a lot of discussion over the 4 months of planning board meetings that we've attended. However, I would point out that the financial capacity letter that we submitted was not the one raised in public comment last meeting. The one raised in the last meeting was an old letter in which we updated in November, which the board accepted and used as part of our package for preliminary approval. So with that said, also recent projects have the similar letter that were approved, and we verified that with staff that that letter and its formatting and language has sufficed to this point. So speaking with the bank, more specificity for a small group is not feasible. You know, I was in Puerto Rico for trying to winter there and came back specifically for this meeting. And I asked if I just went over there and dropped off a $3 million check, they're not gonna write specific language to that effect. And we played a theoretical game up to $100 million. So the differences in letters, being more of a bank relationship letter, has been the standard that this board has accepted for recently approved projects, and the letter in question was accepted by y'all for the preliminary approval.
So you have nothing new to offer? Okay, as a preliminary approval is not a final approval.
Correct.
Okay. The letter really doesn't tell us anything about your financial capacity other than that you've had a relationship with Maine Community Bank. Mm-hmm. That's it. I don't know what the board's past practices have been, but I do know that we've raised it with a number of applicants in the last few months. And we've raised it in this instance. And I'd be surprised if you went back, you wouldn't see it raised at every meeting when this application has been before this board. As we said before, the last meeting, I would expect at least, that the letter of financial capacity would say that, one, far as the bank is concerned, you have the financial capacity or you have the ability to raise the capital necessary for a project like this. The letter, as I recall, the November letter, simply says that you have a relationship with the bank.
And they're aware of the details of the project. We've been working with them with soft costs. We've already spent $400,000 on the project. The project is in the works, and monies have and are being spent. The issue is the bank doesn't know, there's no commitment letter, which the board has explicitly said they don't expect.
Right.
So before a commitment letter, that verbiage is open to different interpretations.
Well, it may be open to different interpretations, but I think it's the board's interpretation that matters.
So I would ask if recent projects, a similar letter has sufficed, and that letter sufficed for preliminary approval, what would change in the interim? And I would ask to the extent in which there's explicit and objective standards for letter submission. And further, I would ask, to what extent are those letters validated and verified? Are members of the board or staff calling financial institutions to verify that in fact it's a factual letter? And from what source? It's an entirely subjective standard that was met previously, so to pull that out at the formal hearing would cause question.
Any other questions with the applicant? Thank you. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board this evening. You will need to limit your comments to those that are relative or related to the special exception use permit application that is before us. The public hearing has otherwise been concluded on this, the subdivision and site plan review applications.
Good evening. I have a statement I'd like read into the record. I have copies for you if you'd like that. If I can distribute those. And I have a statement for, I've been canvassing the neighborhood, and I've been asking the neighbors if they agree with the statement that I made, and they've been signing on. I would like to submit those as well.
You should introduce yourself and give us your address.
Excuse me?
You should introduce yourself and give us your address.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Ron Russell, 20 Elm Street in Auburn, and I've been I've lived there for 52 years, and I've been an Auburn taxpayer.
Does the applicant have a copy of whatever we're looking at?
I make a statement and respectfully request it enter into the record of my opposition to the proposed Auburn Town Center apartments on 15 Academy Street, particularly the waiver the developer is requesting in advance of the project. Waivers are intended for rare and exceptional circumstances, not as a means to bypass standards meant to protect neighborhoods. In this case, the waiver would permit a building that far exceeds the city's intended limits, including a continuous wall more than 2.5 times the allowed building length. The design is fundamentally out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood and would permanently alter its character. The Academy Street area is a long-established neighborhood with limited capacity for increased traffic, parking, demand, stormwater runoff, and visual impact. The scale and mass of this project, made possible only through a waiver, would place disproportionate and lasting burdens on nearby residents. Equally concerning is the precedent this would set. If zoning and design standards can be waived for projects of this size, they lose their purpose as meaningful safeguards. Future development will expect similar treatment, further eroding neighborhood protections. While the city may have met the legal requirements for public notice, conversations with neighbors make it clear that the notice was not sufficient. Many residents were unaware of the project or its scale until very recently, suggesting the process did not adequately engage those most affected. Auburn can support growth without weakening its standards. For these reasons, I urge city officials to deny the requested waiver. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to address the board on this application? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing with a motion to do so.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor? Let the record reflect that Riley Bergeron did show up at 6:05. Just when Tim DeRoche said you would. Very good. Deliberation amongst the board or questions for the applicants? Tim?
I have a question for staff.
Sure.
Staff, could you, Mr. Russell spoke of sufficient notice. Can you review what the city's rules are for notifying neighborhoods about projects and whether or not those standards were met through all aspects of this application?
Yeah, I do know that the standards for noticing abutters was met throughout the whole process. We're required to notify abutters for public hearings 14 days in advance. We mail notices. We post a legal ad in the Sun Journal 12 and 7 days before the meeting. So we did follow the ordinance as far as notifying abutters.
Thank you.
I would just add that there are some communities that define abutters differently in Auburn. Some communities define them as direct abutters to a project. Auburn defines it as property owners within 500 feet. So Auburn chooses to do a larger notification than some other communities, and we did that.
So Auburn chooses to do a 500-foot radius from the application site, and that is what was followed?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the record can reflect that Bob Hayes has joined us now.
My apologies
No problem.
to the chair, to the board, to the staff.
Thank you, Bob. Yes. Okay.
Yes, I have a question for staff. I kind of got shuffled around with all the different packets, but do we know if the project triggered the traffic permit, the traffic movement permit at all?
No, it did not. So the traffic movement permit is triggered by 100 trips in the peak hour. So the traffic study was part of the larger package that's posted online, and it did not trigger that.
I would, my recollection is that at the last meeting, we did vote on the waiver, and if we were to reopen that, it would have to be by a matter of motion for reconsideration. It would have to be somebody who voted in favor of it making that motion and all. I'm not suggesting one way or the other whether that should happen. I'm just pointing out that we did vote to grant that waiver at our last meeting. Before we move to a vote on this matter, I just want to confirm with the applicant again that a representative of the applicant at the last meeting indicated that the color, the texture, and the materials as shown on the plans submitted by the applicant are indeed what will be constructed if this plan is approved, and you would agree that you would accept the motion conditioned on that. And I just want to reaffirm that that's the case, and I would be looking to staff to give us some guidance on what exactly to refer to if indeed we are going to ask the applicant to construct what has been shown us.
We have a rendering, including in the packet that the board has, as well as staff. We can show that on the screen, but I think that would be the best reference for the materials and appearance
Okay?
of the building.
Great Falls downtown at New Auburn. Now it's back on the main page, downtown revitalization, if you scroll down. So we're pulling up the downtown revitalization plan, which will show the inspiration of where the work started 4 years ago, because I think that's going to explain and address some of the comments that were made in aggregate. So 4 years ago, we met with the city based on their desires for this development project, and basically more or less won the bid to buy that city-owned property. So there was never an idea where an individual could come in and buy it and do whatever they want, whether to keep it at a lot or to build something in their mind. So these for sale properties were city-owned. We met with Jay Brenchek and came up with what the city would find to be an acceptable development based on the downtown revitalization plan. And if we continue to scroll down, we see that our development is smack dab in the area for that development. And I'm going to point out two things. One, there's a rendering of the type buildings they wanted to be built, which you would see as similar to our design, as well as scroll down. The redevelopment. So you could see we're right in the heart of this area. So this zone, these three specific name zones, wanted specific things, one of which were buildings that covered 80 to 90% of a lot. Hence one of the design decisions that required the waiver granted in the last meeting. We continue to scroll down to the rendering of the example. You can see the rendering an inspiration of what they specifically wanted in this area, which informed our design process. We elected to not do retail on the bottom floor because of the neighborhood and because of future projects planned, the brewery at 186 Main Street and the retail for the parking lot out here. So keeping in mind of what was desired, the form-based code, the desire for buildings to reach 80, 90% of lot coverage, and a larger building covering that surface area, that's what we came to, which comes to my point. This has been a project 4 years in the making. Geotechnical studies, engineering studies, structural studies, all of that are done. So from a cost estimate standpoint, the materials have been selected. So to answer your question very specifically, the rendering as shown are the selected materials which are intended for final build. There is no change in color, change from hardy board, change the terraces or the balconies, et cetera. So very specifically, that design is the design. That is the final plan. That's a final iteration after 4 years.
What you were mentioning about the waiver earlier, we have to re-vote on that, or do we just have to approve the project based on the review that we're doing today, since we preliminarily approved it last month?
The waiver was voted on at the last meeting and approved. So at this meeting, the board will be voting on final approval.
Okay.
Final site plan, subdivision, and special exception approval. You envision 3 different votes for each of the,
If there's agreement with the recommended conditions in the staff report, I think you could do them all as one. I think if you want to edit those or modify those, then it would make more sense to vote on each standard if there's a question about whether or not they're met.
And you're referring to what exists on page 5 of 6 of our packet for that?
There's a suggested motion in the memo on the last page that includes the motion includes for subdivision, site plan, and special exception, and a list of 3 conditions. So there's 2 options. You can either read the motion that generally encompasses all 3 requirements, or you can go through each condition and vote on each one individually, which would take longer, but it would be more thorough, so it depends how the board wants to vote.
well, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Before we get to the motion part, I just wanted to say a couple things. So, obviously, we've heard a lot of public feedback about this project. Some of it good, some of it not so good. But I'm of a mind that that the developer has come before us with this plan. You know, it's no secret that there is a huge need for housing in Auburn. And there's no promise that this will deliver all of the goals of that, of filling that need, but it's one step to fill that need. And so, you know, I'm moving in the direction of voting in favor of the project. And so, so that's where I'm at with this currently.
Anyone else want to offer any preliminary observations?
Just a thought, and just stating for the record that at the last meeting, I opposed the granting of the waiver on the basis that I believe that this is wildly out of character for the neighborhood, and I still believe that, and think that it fails to meet the criteria of the special exception. The special exception is triggered because of the size of the building being over 12,000 square feet. And I believe that granting that special exception will alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
Thoughts, Bob?
I guess just a question to staff. I know in the past, we've had some developments that have been presented with the architectural design, coloration, facade, so forth, but it did change after approval. So I think we're trying to lock in, which I agree with. Is there a latitude at the staff level to allow for some variation as we proceed, even after approval?
So for the building design, the board is approving what they're seeing. So that rendering that you're seeing and the materials they're using is what's being voted on ultimately. So if they were to change that or alter it in any way, they would be in violation of their site plan, one, or they may have to come back for an additional review and amendment if they were changing the building so much so that it would affect the site plan review criteria. So ultimately, the board is voting on the rendering that they're seeing, and beyond that, it's out of the board's control.
But you could make that explicitly clear as part of a motion as well. There are some alterations that can happen due to things beyond the developer's control after an approval. But given this discussion of the board and the focus on those specific materials as part of this, I would suggest the board just make it clear with an additional condition if you're inclined to, that any change to those materials or appearance would have to come back to the board.
But we could get into a lot of minutia doing that, because that rendering doesn't show extreme detail, where there could be some things where like this fixture in the rendering looks like this, but the real fixture is actually this, which is irrelevant to the large scale rendering we see. If we go down that road, I think we could get into a lot of sticky minutia if we want to get overly detailed. Probably a generalization of sticking to the current rendering is probably the best thing. That's just my opinion.
Anybody else want to offer any thoughts before we move to motions? I will say that I voted in favor of the waiver. I think that this is a good project. I will probably be voting against it because I don't think that you've met your very simple burden of demonstrating financial capacity, and the fact that you came in here and chose to argue about it rather than bringing in more information was troubling for me. So with that in mind, I certainly will. I would support a motion that contains a condition for the project to be built as shown on the renderings that we have seen, and if it's approved, that would be the case, but I'm probably not inclined to vote in favor of it.
I make a motion to approve the proposal on behalf of Auburn Town Center Apartments LLC for the construction of a 53-unit residential development at 15 Academy Street pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 4, Division 14, Form-Based Code, Article 16, Division 2, Site Plan, Division 3, Special Exception, and Division 4, Subdivision, with the following conditions. No permit shall be issued until 15 additional off-street parking spaces are secured or the applicant otherwise provides the spaces by requiring the ordinance, spaces required by the ordinance at the time the permit is issued. Also, that prior to the insurance of building permits, the final subdivision plan shall be recorded at the Androscoggin County Registry of Deeds. No plan shall be recorded, no permits issued until the applicant demonstrates that final easements are signed and recorded.
I'd like to put an addendum to those conditions.
Well, I think we'll need a second on that, or else we'll have to perhaps you can tell Riley what your addendum would be, and maybe he'll alter his motion.
I was also going to add, referencing the architectural rendering already in position of staff for aesthetic standards in the exterior presentation.
With the additional condition that the renderings given to staff, any significant changes to the renderings given to staff would need additional board approval.
Need a second?
Yeah.
Second. Motion by Riley, second by Belial. Any further discussion? Yes, Bob.
I was late, so I'm not sure if I can vote or not.
I think we've reviewed this project for a few months. My personal observation would be that you've been here for 99% of what we've discussed, and but you can make that choice for yourself, but I certainly think that you probably have sufficient knowledge of the project.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody see it differently? Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion passes 5-2. Thank you. Our next item, the public hearing, Chapter 60 zoning amendment, an amendment to be considered pursuant to LD 427, legislative document 427, an act to regulate municipal parking space minimums. Staff will be presenting proposed changes to this Chapter 60 zoning for compliance. I will say that when I first read this, I thought we were changing the standard. It no longer had to be 20 by 10, it was going to be something else, but we're talking about the number of spaces that are necessary for approval, so. Staff?
Yes, so this is one of 3 new housing bills. This one pertains to parking, on parking space minimums and regarding off-street parking. So parking can add significant cost to housing development, so this was passed to sort of make it easier on the developer to not require minimum parking. So a lot of towns require a minimum of 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. That adds a significant barrier to developing and to design of housing units. So this ordinance addresses both minimum parking spaces and off-street parking. So for the most part, Auburn is compliant with the minimum parking. It allows 1 space per dwelling unit in most every zone. The second piece of that is the off-street parking arrangement. So currently the ordinance says if you can't meet the parking requirement, you can have off-site parking within 1,000 feet of your site, which is what 15 Academy did. This new state regulation says you can be within a quarter mile of the development, so it makes it more permissible to have parking. It has to be through a shared parking agreement as well. So this is the statute that I pulled up here. You'll see in your packet that there are some red line changes of certain sections. So the first you'll note is the form-based code. For multifamily, it currently allows 1 space per dwelling unit plus 1 guest space per 4 dwelling units. So it adds up, I think, 1.25 spaces. So that was taken out. And you'll notice also there's a few changes in the off-street parking section as well. So we took out that first sentence, which says required off-street parking as permitted in the form-based code areas. So we went general, saying anywhere parking is allowed in any residential or commercial zone, this applies. And then we crossed out parking, off-street parking can be within a quarter mile of the principal building or use. And then if the developer is engaged in an off-site parking agreement, they have to provide documentation demonstrating that there is sufficient parking at the off-site facility. The other thing you'll notice in this section is there was language in the multifamily suburban district on parking that was taken out. That language was confusing. So we took that language out and copied it into the off-street parking standards. And this is not really a requirement of the state statute. It's really just allowing the board to impose certain standards for parking in a business if it abuts a residential use. So to allow like landscaping and screening and drainage. So it's not directly relevant to this, but it made it confusing having it in multifamily suburban, which didn't make sense. And then I think the final thing is we added a definition for parking agreement. So that's an agreement between a property developer and the owner of an off-site parking facility to provide required parking within a quarter mile of the development site, just to meet the statute here. And I believe those are all the changes we made. I think one last thing to add that I just noticed recently that's not in your packet is in the mobile home park overlay, we still allow for a minimum of 2 spaces per dwelling unit, so we will take that out. So that's another recommendation that we have, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that. We ask that if there are no further questions, that this moves forward to council to be adopted.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so we'll take questions of staff, and then we'll open it up to the public. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, the genesis of this change is LD 427 from the state, correct?
Yes, it's from the state.
So your revisions bring us into compliance outside of the few little things you spoke about at the end, which are basically housekeeping and taking care of some superfluous issues that you see in the form-based code. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Thank you.
I had a question about, in the section 60-607, the number 10, that first, the addition, where it says the planning board shall impose reasonable conditions for off-street parking. Is that in every instance? So it's a case by, project by project, deciding what's reasonable?
Yeah, so that's case by case, and that's if you have a business that abuts a residential district. So you could require like additional buffering or screening of that parking area.
The business's parking area
Yes.
doesn't address the number of parking spaces needed, but this bill only is addressing residential development parking needs, correct? And what you're talking about would be something affecting a business activity.
Yes, this would be something that would affect a business activity. It's not directly relevant to this ordinance. It was moved here purely for clarification purposes.
I guess my question is just, or my thought process is just with the phrasing reasonable, because that is,
Very subjective.
yeah. That was pretty much my thought about it.
Okay. Yeah, we can amend that language.
I think the sentence still works if we just strike reasonable. Shall impose conditions for off-street parking serving a business.
I think if you're gonna, if there's consensus to remove, or I guess it's staff's proposal, perhaps I would want to remove it, but if they do that, then I would like to change shall to may. So the board may. Otherwise, we
Yeah, that reads
stuck having
better,
to-
yep.
So do I understand that this isn't being sent to us by council? This is something that we are initiating to council?
That's correct. This is something the board is initiating to council, and you're having open to public comment on it.
Okay. And are we on firm ground to add the language regarding the mobile home parking situation if it wasn't part of this proposal that was notified? You know, this is a public hearing and all. Are we okay to add that mobile home parking provision?
Yes, I believe you're okay to add it, even though it wasn't in the packet. But that's a recommendation that we have, and it was missed in this review.
Okay.
And your action will be to recommend that the council, approve or not approve a change like this with any edits that you also recommend.
Right.
So there will be another public hearing that the council would hold before it becomes
So when it
effective.
gets to the council, that if we agree with the suggestion that you've made about the mobile home park, or we make any other changes like has been proposed by Riley, that's what the council will have a public hearing on.
Yeah, we would ask that you recommend those changes as part of any motion.
Okay.
But yes, we would make a draft that completes your recommended changes, and that would be included in the council packet for public.
I'd be interested in hearing members' thoughts on the word agreement. I don't really understand. I understand what an agreement is, but for this agreement perhaps with the project that we just approved, is there a minimum duration? Is there, if a project might exist for 25, 50, or 100 years, are we expecting that the off-street parking arrangement, if there has to be a remote site within a quarter mile, that it would have a similar lifespan? What would we expect to see in one of those agreements?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because some people are obviously, could be using like city parking in the Court Street garage for only a temporary period of time. So I think the definition, we went pretty general. We didn't give a time frame, and I don't believe the state references a time frame either. So it could be for a short period of time or for a long period of time, but we wanted to keep that pretty open.
I think we could react to a situation where we wanted to make sure that city parking garage passes, public parking passes were a possibility, but those are annual renewals. If somebody had an arrangement that ceased, they'd be in violation of their site plan approval. We would have to take some land use enforcement action for them violating their site plan approval. But we do expect that somebody could meet their parking need in different ways over time, as long as they continue to meet that with an arrangement.
I also think the agreement would most likely reference the terms of the parking duration.
I'm not sure, looking at Section 3 of the legislation, that we have the ability to impose any additional requirements. The last sentence of Section 3 says, "A municipality may not impose additional barriers to the approval of such parking agreements beyond verification of the adequacy of parking supply." So I agree that this is vague and could very well lead to a situation where you have an agreement that is not adequate for the duration or the scope of the project, but I'm not sure we have the ability to specify any parameters beyond just the number of parking spaces.
Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What you said makes perfect sense. The legislation itself, we're supposed to verify we can't do anything more than verify the adequacy, but I'm not really sure that you would find it adequate if somebody came in and had said, yeah, I've got a 6-month arrangement for parking.
We have no enforceability. The municipality doesn't have any enforceability other than saying, yes, the parking exists, but we cannot further limit it in any way from that. Is that correct?
I don't know that that's correct. I think that Maureen's raising a good point, but I'm not sure that. I guess that we will. I'm not terribly uncomfortable leaving it unsaid as to what the terms of an agreement have to be. We can address it. I mean, if somebody comes to us with a 6-month agreement, I'm going to have some heartburn with that. And if maybe we would draw a line in the sand and say, nah, that's not adequate. That's a ruse. Could come in with a 6-day agreement if it could be a 6-month agreement. So. Okay. Is it within our purview? Let me ask 2 questions. In your experience, have developers found the parking requirements that exist in our ordinance problematic?
I think a few years ago, don't quote me on the exact number of years, we eliminated commercial parking standards, and we reduced the requirement for residential parking. So I think the motivations behind the state law to limit a municipality's ability to require more than one space are not driven by Auburn. Certainly, they're driven by places that are using a much more stringent standard. But no, I think Auburn, at least in recent years, since the changes, has been viewed as pretty flexible. We're just not quite in compliance with that state law of one space per unit. So,
I can recall at least one project that we recently approved where the number of parking spaces exceeded the number that we required. And the developer was not interested in simply having the required number of spaces. They wanted to have more, creating more impervious area, more runoff and all that stuff. In your experience, are you familiar with whether municipalities can limit the number of parking spaces?
I think you can, and it's pretty common that people are proposing more parking spaces than what we require, especially retail uses and even residential. Market rate units are quite often proposing 1.5 or 2 parking spaces per unit when we required 1.25.
So do you think that we would have the authority to insist that the developer comply with the one parking space per unit, as opposed to choosing voluntarily to build twice as many parking spaces as apparently the legislature has decided is necessary and adequate?
If the ordinance was written that way, I think you could limit the number of spaces as well. We've more often looked at the traffic engineer's estimate of demand and kind of looked at it as we want the project to supply the parking that's needed so that they don't impact other uses in the neighborhood. But a big box retail is one example where I know there are communities that will limit the number of parking spaces because they're designing huge parking lots to meet demand for the few weeks around Christmas maybe, and the rest of the lot is, a lot of the lot is vacant for the rest of the year. Our ordinance is not written that way, but that's something we could consider if you wanted to.
Would there be any interest on the part of the board to have staff consider that? Is there a time limit that we're under? Let me ask whether there's any interest. If there's not, then I don't need to ask my next question. I guess not. I guess it's only me. All right. Is there a time frame within which we have to act on this legislative?
The state law is already in effect, so Auburn is in effect in violation of the state law at this point. So we'd like to move it forward, but there's no exact timeline. There's not a great risk if you needed another month.
Unlike a lot of the other changes made to the state land use laws that don't take effect until 27 or whatever it is, this one.
This one's in effect now.
Okay. Well, I'll open up for public hearing. Is anybody, member of the public, would like to address the board on this? Well, let me ask for a motion for a public hearing first.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to have a public hearing.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. I had not intended to speak on this matter until a subject came up in the course of discussion between staff and the board, and I'm concerned that there was a class or a category of additional property types and areas added to the motion that's under consideration, namely mobile home parks. This is different from adding a couple of spaces or reducing a couple of spaces or increasing or decreasing the width of a space. This is a substantive category of additional properties at issue areas of the community. And I'm thinking back to the adoption of the T42B zoning ordinance 3 years ago when there was an additional category or areas of a zone added that was added by the council to what the planning board had recommended, and that was advised against by the city attorney at the time, and the matter was reorganized and then presented with that additional area incorporated in a whole separate time around. Here, the addition is within the planning board, but the matter that at issue is the public notice that was given, and if the notice didn't include reference to mobile home parks as being included, I think that's a substantive addition that would require public notice. One person's view.
Would anyone else care to address the board? A motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Then moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor? So done.
To Mr. Beal's point, there's a motion says, I make a motion to approve the proposed changes. Does that, if it's not in the packet, does that actually include the mobile home thing, or would that be something that would just have to come back another public hearing in the future? So if I just say the proposed changes are what is in the packet, which doesn't have the mobile home area, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the change regarding mobile home parks was not added. It was an oversight that was missed after packets went out. So the motion that we would recommend would be that the proposed changes and also the amendments, which include under number 10 for reasonable conditions around parking, and then the second, which would be to amend the mobile home park standards to eliminate having 2 spaces per dwelling unit. So we're recommending that those changes be included in the motion for tonight.
But if we're, if I share the concern that he had, that it maybe wasn't publicly noticed correctly, and I make a motion to approve the proposed changes, and I'm only referencing the ones that we have in this packet, that other one can come before us in a separate public hearing in the future, right?
It could. I think if there's concerns about that notice, and that's a legitimate argument, you could postpone action and ask us to bring it back to the board next month and wrap that into it. So either way, I think it's easier to kind of consider them as a package, probably. And if it takes an extra meeting, that's not a problem.
If we were to approve it, we're approving it to be forwarded to city council, and it can be further deliberated and clarified at city council, correct?
Yes, yeah. But Mr. Beal raising that argument, I think it's relatively low risk to try to incorporate matching the standard for all dwelling units with mobile homes, but that's a legitimate argument that could come up. So it may be better to not act if you want us to include that in the public notice for next month. We could bring that back, and then you could forward it to council with a recommendation.
I personally, I'm not uncomfortable with it. I asked the question even before Mr. Beal spoke on the topic. And I guess I'm not uncomfortable with it because that's what a public hearing is about. I don't think that things come to us cast in stone that can't be revised and discussed. I acknowledge that the notice didn't specifically mention mobile home parks. But in this instance, what we're trying to do, as Mr. Drosch pointed out earlier, is simply bring our ordinance into compliance with state law. And if we didn't include mobile home parks, I gather what we're saying is that we're still not consistent with state law. It's going to require a change, whether we make it now or we make it later. I think if we were to recommend the proposal presented to us with the additional limitation of 1 parking space per mobile home in a mobile home park, that there'll be another public hearing and an opportunity for anybody to come and argue against that. I guess I'm just having trouble understanding how anybody can argue against it if it's a state law that we've got to comply with. Can we make this more confusing?
I'm ready to make a motion. I make a motion to postpone decision made on this topic until a date certain of our March meeting, so the trailer park information can be included.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Unanimous. Next item on our agenda is other business, comprehensive plan update. Staff and chair of the comprehensive plan committee will be presenting an update on the future land use map, policies, and actions to date. What? Oh. Oh, sorry
Yeah,
about
section
that.
6044.
Thank you. Way ahead of myself. Sorry about that. Oh, got it. Oh, okay, the unsewered lots. All right. Next item on our agenda is actually proposed amendment to section 60-44, buildable unsewered lots. Hear from staff?
I'll give a little background before Sam gives you the details on this proposal. There is a public hearing related to housing laws that was scheduled for today with the state legislature that would modify some of the provisions related to sewer, in particular 20,000 square foot lots. It was supposed to start at 1 o'clock today. It didn't start on time. It was third on the Housing Committee's agenda, and it might be happening right now if it started at 7, but we're going to recommend that you accept any public input on this one, but delay a recommendation till we have the benefit of where the legislature is headed on that.
So because the public hearing has been scheduled, we should give the public a chance to speak, but your suggestion is that we then table the matter?
That's what I'm suggesting, yeah.
Okay. All right. Any discussion amongst ourselves about that? Everybody comfortable with that course of action if it comes to it? Okay. All right, we'll open the public hearing for comments on proposed amendment to chapter 6, proposed amendment to section 60-44 unsewered lots.
Stephen Beal, still at 575 Johnson Road. I did intend to speak on this matter. I would urge the board to be very careful in redrafting any parts of this ordinance because of the substantial areas that are affected by this may already be subject to other controls. There is also an ordinance section which is 60-42, I believe it is, which says that the regulation doesn't reduce lot size requirements in residential districts having larger minimum lot sizes, and there are some of those. Most importantly, the ordinance will not be effective in virtually all of the Lake Auburn watershed area in which there are no septic systems permitted in that part of the watershed which overlies the Agriculture and Resource Protection Zone. That's 73% of the watershed. The other 27% of the watershed largely lies in the low-density country residential district as a result of some original earlier zoning and amendments to the rural residential zone in the watershed, which was converted in its entirety to all lots which were rural residential, which had a 1 acre minimum in the watershed, to low-density country residential, now requiring 3 acres as the minimum lot size in the watershed. So there are virtually no lots that would fit outside of either of those two categories. There are a few lots in East Auburn which are on the public system, and there may be a very few lots, perhaps a handful, in somewhere along Outer Turner Street and approaching the East Auburn area, which are not either in agriculture, resource protection, low-density country residential, or on public sewer, but there are so few of them that it almost looks like spot zoning if you attempt to modify a whole ordinance to fit a handful of lots. So that covers the watershed topic that I had in mind. The other huge landmass area in the city is the agriculture and resource protection zone. And the ordinance there was very substantially overhauled 3 years ago now, in which there was a committee formed, had both public and affected landowners on the drafting committee. Mr. Cousins and I were on that committee. And in the course of that, it was developed that there were only 9 lots in the entire city that were in the ag zone outside of the watershed, which were 20,000 square feet or less. Again, that looks like when you've got 9 lots in some roughly 13,500 acres of ag zone, in which you're going to modify an ordinance to fit that number of lots, that looks pretty spotty to me, just as a general proposition. And further, there's a very substantial characteristic of the ag zone ordinance now, which requires that a parcel of land will support a house and a septic system only if that residence is accessory to the principal use of the land for a farming, other agricultural, natural resource, or recreational use. I can't envision a lot of 20,000 square feet in that very large zone, which would support any legitimate farming or agricultural use, or unless it's some unique natural feature, a recreational and natural resource use. I'm not aware of any of those unique features in our city. So I would again suggest that any attempt to modify this ordinance is going to be narrowed down to a very small number of lots in areas of the city, unless they are in other residential lots, which are more urban in character certainly than the watershed or ag and resource protection zones, or that part of the low-density country residential zone within the watershed. So I urge very careful drafting if you are going to make any changes to this ordinance.
Anyone else care to address the board? Shall we close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All in favor of closing the public hearing? Public hearing is closed. Given Mr. Cousins' instructions or suggestions to us regarding proposed legislation that might bear on this, do we want to have any further discussion this evening?
My thought is, under the guidance of Mr. Cousins and public comment, I think we should table, as we discussed earlier.
Before we, I just would like to know if we do visit this issue again, which I guess the ball is going to be in your court as to whether we visit this issue again, if state law preempts us from doing anything that you might otherwise urge us to do. I guess I would like to know if it's possible to see a map of how many 20,000 square foot or smaller unsewered lots are there in this community. We can get a sense of whether this is an answer to a problem that doesn't exist or not. Any other comments before we take up Mr. DeRoche's motion, which, was that a motion? Not yet. It was a thought, okay?
I have a motion. I move to table the discussion relating to the unsewered lots and the proposed zoning ordinance changes to Chapter 60 relating to unsewered lots.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. As proposed, would this then require additional notification if this comes back to the board for public hearing?
If it comes back, it will. Yep.
Okay. And we're all comfortable with that, understanding that that's the case. Okay. All in favor of the motion to table? Unanimous. Thank you. All right. Now, it's other business. Comprehensive Plan update. Staff and Chair of the Comprehensive Plan Committee will be presenting an update on the future land use map, policies, and actions to date.
Good evening.
Evening.
Just as a way of introduction, for those who may not know who we are, and for the public, I'm John Cleveland, and I'm the chair of the Comprehensive Plan Committee. And with me is Lauren Cafe. She's the long-range planner in the planning department, who's been working steadily on the comp plan with us. And so we're here to give a periodic update of where we are with the comprehensive plan and where we're going, to try to keep yourselves and then later the city council apprised of our work. Tonight we're going to cover several subjects. I just want to quickly go over them so you'll be aware of what we'll be looking to do. So we're going to review the project timeline. Lauren will redo that. And Lauren will also review our final vision statement and the required components of comprehensive plan. I will review policies and action section of the plan. We're going to review a draft future land use map. Lauren will go over that with you. And then I'll go over the next steps in the plan, and also what future opportunities will be for the public to participate. And of course, at the end, we'll be happy to take any questions or discussion that you have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lauren to review the project timeline.
Thank you, John. So as you can see on the screen, we had phase 1 of the comprehensive plan, but from March to August in 2025, and that was the inventory and analysis. That was paralleled with public engagement and visioning. Then we moved into and are currently doing action plan development. So that includes future land use mapping and policies and actions. Then we'll look to finalize the plan from May to October of this year. So in the fall of 2025, following community engagement over the summer, the committee came to this vision statement that states Auburn is a resilient, connected, welcoming, and intentional community where everyone can thrive. Abundant and healthy farms, forests, lakes, and rivers surround Auburn's vibrant neighborhoods and its dynamic commercial, industrial, and mixed-use centers. This vision statement has a few guiding principles, and along with that are 8 goals you'll see on the board, on the screen, excuse me. Those include community, housing, economy, transportation, natural environment, parks and rec, infrastructure, and land use. And those goals will come up again when John discusses the policies and actions. So the required components of a comprehensive plan are the inventory and analysis, the vision statement that I just showed you, informed by community engagement, future land use map and the future land use plan, policies and actions, regional coordination approach, and implementation strategy or plan. So what is a future land use, lovingly called FLU? It's a vision, a long-term vision for how land should be used. It guides growth, development, and infrastructure planning. The committee has determined 3 growth area categories they would like to use for the future land use map. These include what we're referring to as high growth or high density areas that should see the highest amount of growth, density, and infrastructure investment, then followed by moderate growth or moderate density. These are areas that should see a moderate amount of growth and investment and could serve as a transition between high and low growth areas. And then we have low growth or low density areas that should see the least amount of growth, density, and infrastructure investment. Now, the future land use map is not zoning. It informs zoning changes and development priorities, but it is not a zoning map. Multiple zoning districts could fit into one growth area, and it doesn't establish specific information like building height requirements, setbacks, or floor area. Alongside a future land use map and within each of the 3 growth areas, there are land use categories that further breaks down the development that the community would like to see over the lifespan of the plan. They provide definition and guidance within each growth area. They describe different kinds of places that exist or could exist in a community based on how the land is used, the types of buildings, and how people live, work, and get around in those areas. The committee will start drafting those land use categories at our February meeting and continue into the spring. So our draft, and I will emphasize draft, future land use map is up on the screen here. The areas in red are the high growth, high density areas. The committee, to get to this point, determined some foundational principles that they worked off of. High growth areas in red include areas served by water and sewer, areas with planned water and sewer extensions, industrial areas, and areas along major corridors. Our low growth area is the area in green. This includes the Lake Auburn watershed, the Taylor Pond watershed, and most areas zoned AGRP today. The moderate growth areas are in yellow, and those include all those not in red or green.
I want to speak to you about the next phase, or the phase we're working on right now, which is developing policies and actions for the comprehensive plan. I just wanted for a moment to refer you back to when you saw the page with the red on it, a chrism. These are the goals of the community. There's 6 of them that we're working for policies and actions that conclude general goal of community, housing, the economy, transportation, natural environment, parks and recreation. So these policies and actions relate to each one of these 6. So there are policies for each of them, and then under the policies there'll be action plans going forward. Policies and actions really provide essential direction for the implementation of the comprehensive plan. The Comprehensive Plan Committee met and over a number of meetings developed policies, 45 of them, and 274 actions that would be taken to implement the policies. Those were then reviewed by administrative staff here across all of the disciplines in the community, highway, transportation, education, so forth, to get their input, which was very useful in doing that. So the policies are generally provide a direction for the implementation of the comp plan going forward. Policies are somewhat broader statements, but they're also statements that are informed by the public input that we receive through this process, and they're clear enough and specific enough so it's understood what the outcome of that policy would be. The actions are associated with the policy. The actions are what you specifically want to do to implement that policy, to get it done. And you want to be specific enough so that it's a usable document. This document is intended to be a guidance for the community, elected officials, staff, planning board, to be able to implement and know what the outcomes are going to be. If you're too general in developing those policies and actions, it will be difficult to implement them because it won't be clear what the outcome is supposed to be. What is that supposed to look like? We're trying to achieve a comprehensive plan that the community will actually be able to use on an annual basis, both with the policymakers as well as with the administrative staff who will be charged for implementing them. So we need to spend some time on it. going forward here. The next stages in this is that we're going to now take all of these policies and action tasks, and we're going to review them with a little bit smaller group, both some from the committee as well as administrative staff, to make sure that they're clear and direct, and we know what the action is that needs to be taken. Then once we finish that, they'll come back to the Comprehensive Planning Committee. They will review it again, and we'll also then have an opportunity for public input on those particular policies and actions. There is some slides that show you a demonstration of sort of how they're constructed and related to one another. This is an example from where our consultant has done a plan in Ellsworth. So on the left-hand side, it shows the policies, and then on the right-hand side, it shows a specific action and which policy it's related to. Also added into that will be a timeline and a designation of either a department or an organization that will have primary responsibility for that implementation. All of the purpose of this is to give clear direction and have the ability for the plan in Auburn to meet the visions of what the community asks for, but actually be useful in being implemented going forward as well. So I think that brings us to the next steps. So the next steps that we're going to be doing, we're going to have, as I indicated, board review of the policies and actions. We're going to further develop the future land use map with the categories that describe what the different areas, particularly residential areas, may look like. Going to have community input on the draft map and the policies and the actions. Then we'll finalize the map, the policies, and the actions, and work on developing the final comprehensive plan with the implementation section in it as well. Future opportunities to participate, Lauren?
We still have our website, so it's tinyurl.com/plan-Auburn to engage on that social pinpoint and add comments and pin areas on the map, to view our community engagement summary and also the inventory analysis and other documents. That website has a lot of good stuff there. We will have community engagement on the future land use policy and actions, and we're aiming for April. And we have a comprehensive plan committee meetings on the 4th Tuesday of every month.
So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, or any discussion that you'd like to have that's related to the comprehensive plan. We've covered all the bases. That sounds great.
I think it's great that there's a group of people dedicated to the growth and future of the community. It's very easy to get caught in the daily mundane.
Yes.
And it's habitual and it's human nature. It's nice to see that there's a group and a movement looking for opinions and making changes as they see fit, and I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you very much. Also, the plan ultimately has to go back to the state for review, and we have to have them sign off on that we've met all of the requirements, and we're being very careful to do that.
Well, that's a good segue for, I think it is, for my question. When does that state review occur? Because as I understand the process, when your committee is through, you're going to hand us a comprehensive plan, and by our ordinance, we're the ones who are to prepare, not really, you did it, and recommend to the city council the comprehensive plan. So will the state have looked at it and given you feedback before it comes to us and then on to the council, or at what stage will that occur?
That's a good question, Ed. I'm not exactly sure which one comes before the other.
I would think that public hearing and the public City of Auburn process comes first before the state review, but that's a good question that we should get confirmation on. And I have it on a timeline. I just can't picture my timeline right now.
And the state review is basically to see that we followed the correct process, getting public input, having public citizens, and also there are certain requirements that they have in there dealing with some environmental issues and other things that they want to see that we have included in our current policies and actions. We have included those. And then they can sign off and say, you've met all the requirements that state law imposes on you.
And I guess to follow that up, that we don't have a robust state planning office, as I understand. I'm not sure if that's changed recently or not, but I think the process is that there's a planning office that essentially circulates the plan to all the departments at the state level to try to get some feedback from each department that, yeah, that we are doing what we're supposed to do according to, state requirements or whatever. But I agree. It's good that we have the local community working on this plan, that we follow what we have to do, but I give you both credit in the full team that you're working with, because I think the team is held together. I think that it's been a very good approach, and I think people have been truly involved. So I guess what flexibility, as we come up with the plan, it's really, we still go with essentially a 10-year plan, and usually it overlaps into closer to probably 15. But during that period, what flexibility is there in the plan? So we look at it today, but things happen. We hope for the better, and we hope we can follow that plan. So we go through the process now. It's taken, a good year plus. So then it really comes down to administrating it and really at the staff level. So what flexibility during that 10 to 15 year period is there for changes?
Well, there should be some flexibility in regards to the policies and actions, hence why you want to make them somewhat broad, although clear enough so you know what your outcomes are. And you have to anticipate that we won't know, none of us will know exactly all the changes that will occur in the community over 10 years. So we need to be able to be somewhat flexible in doing that. So in that section, you have some opportunity to do that. If you're going to make any significant changes, say like you want to change the land use map, that has to go through a public process, and that it has to be a committee, and the community has to work on it, and it goes back to the state. So any big major changes have to go back. The underlying premise here is that the comprehensive plan is based in law. So it's the method by which a community, by reaching out to its own citizens in a public process, determines where they see the future of their community that they would like to go, and in particular what the land use would be. That then results in a whole different process and permits a community to do zoning, land use zoning. That has to be consistent with your land use map going forward. So that's why you just can't small group of folks can't just decide, well, we're just gonna change this because we want to do something different. Because it's based on that, and if it would be challenged in court, if the community decided to zone an area that was inconsistent with what the land use categories are, that could be challenged in court. And the challenge would be, this was supposed to be, for example, low-density development, and you're making it high-density development. That's not what the community, the people wanted, and therefore that zoning is inconsistent. I actually have a little experience with this because when I was mayor, some of the members of the city council thought we ought to make some changes in the zoning that were not consistent with the land use plan. They had the right as a legislative body to do that. So I did advise them that there would probably be a legal challenge to it that would be difficult to defend. It was challenged, and the changes were voided by the court because of inconsistency. This is part of this real legal process of providing the legal basis for community to go forward and make determinations or restrictions on how land can be used, because you show that it was a public process and that ultimately the community in Auburn, through its representatives, have adopted it.
I was talking with someone the other day and became aware of a law court case, which was argued last Wednesday, in which the City of Bath's comprehensive plan, or changes to their zoning ordinance, were being challenged as being inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. So it'll be one of the first law court decisions, I think, on that topic, and it probably will be out in a month or two.
Yeah, it certainly happens from time to time. So we're trying to keep us within the law. Thank you very much for the opportunity to.
No worries. So thank you for the presentation. I just had my first meeting with the comp plan last month. Thank you all for, allowing me to serve in that capacity. It's quite a group that we have. My question relates to, I know I'm pretty late in this process as well, but has there been some sort of report back from different city committees, whether that be agriculture, natural resource committee, complete streets committee, all these different committees that are doing great work and that are addressing a lot of the issues that citizens have brought up in those surveys, whether that be more trail access, more walkability, and more neighborhoods that have a sense of community and things like that. I find that on the planning board, our hands kind of get tied in terms of what projects get brought forth. We have to look at it objectively about, this is what's being presented to us. Does it fit the ordinance, and does it fit in the comp plan? And so I'm wondering what different changes that you're seeing citizens bring up, and how you guys are implementing that in the plan, and how we can take that on.
Well, I'll start, and Lauren can add, because she's actually doing the work. I just show up. So that's an excellent question, Bilal. And part of what we're doing right now, as I suggested to you, is we're going back to refine and review these policies and actions. So the group of folks that we want to help to do that, and in addition to administrative folks and some planning folks, is to invite committees or boards, a representative from the committee, not the whole board, to sit in on that process. So sustainability and committee would be invited to come, recreation committee would be invited to have someone there as well. In housing for the unhoused committee would be asked. So those committees that have been doing work and looking at it in more detail, we want them at the table and helping us refine these policies and actions.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And one thing in particular that is a sticking point to me is like the complete streets, because I know that Auburn has a complete streets ordinance. I think they're partnered with Lewiston, and it's like a joint kind of thing, but I'm curious to see more of that work in terms of the projects that come before this board, what exactly they're doing to ensure pedestrian safety, bike paths, if it's going to be somewhere in a high-dense zone, and like all of those things that we want to see in those type of neighborhoods.
Are there other components to this comprehensive plan other than just the land use components that you've been discussing tonight? Is there a capital improvement plan that is part of the comprehensive plan, and a housing analysis and things of that nature?
Yes, there is. In fact, Auburn has done a very intensive housing need. That plan is, we reviewed that. That's going to be incorporated here. Talks about the different kinds of housings need, the amount of housing need. So that will be incorporated in it. But there'll be a lot of policy and action items that are going to say, what do we need to do in the recreation department? What do we need? Capital items for facilities, capital items for road maintenance and new roads being improved. So it's going to be down at the level of saying, these are things that you need to do to implement it, either with expenditure of funds, or policies, or getting other organizations involved to help address a number of the issues. So, for example, those that are unhoused, there'll be some effort at the city level, but there are a number of nonprofit organizations that are working with this as well, who we're looking to engage in this process as well. Want to add anything?
You're doing great.
Am I doing okay?
Anyone have comments, questions? Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate it. I assume we'll get another one before this all
Yes.
wraps up?
Yes, so we're hoping to complete the plan by August of this year. Well, something close to that. So yes, so as we finished up the policies and actions sections, implementation sections, we want to come back both to you and the city council to bring them up to date. And by the way, if you have comments, you have both Riley and Belisle that are representing the planning board. They please bring those suggestions to us.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board with any public comments on anything that wasn't on our agenda this evening.
Stephen Beal back once again. Quick question, if I may. What is the status of the subcommittee that was working on revisions to the board's policies and procedures? And is there going to be any opportunity for public comment, either at the subcommittee level or at the full board level on those proposed amendments?
So that subcommittee, which consisted of Maureen and myself and the former chair of the board, met twice last summer, hasn't met since. I think we had a brief discussion last month about reinvigorating it or moving forward with the
That's why I raised the question, because it had come up briefly last month, but I didn't see any forward disposition.
That would require a meeting, and we haven't had a meeting. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, to that point, I made a note to bring that up again during the miscellaneous, because, our agenda's all structured, but there's never really time for any new things. But yeah, that's what I was going to bring up, was
Sure.
the status of that committee and just moving that along the process.
Let me ask, Maureen, do you still have an interest in being on that committee? Do you remember when we last met?
I don't recall us having a full meeting with the three of us.
We didn't.
We attempted to set some meeting times, but were never able to actually have a meeting. So there are no proposed amendments. We really didn't get very far other than just a very high-level discussion. So, yeah, I would be willing to continue on and would love to have, wide participation across the board. I think last time we only had 3 people. So, yeah, let's do it.
Would you like to have more board members if that?
I think that's appropriate. I think, anyone who's willing and interested in participating.
Who might want to participate? It would be meetings that basically would probably be late afternoon, couple of hours. The 2 that we had with Maureen and I in attendance included the city planning staff. And it's to basically look at the rules and procedures that we have and see if we think there are necessary or desired changes that we would want to bring to the board for full consideration. That sounds like something that anyone is interested in participating in.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
You would? Very good.
I am as well.
Okay. Well, good. Then I'll arrange with staff to have a meeting, or perhaps when we finish tonight, anybody who's participating can let me know what days work for them, and I'll try to coordinate something so that we can get started. Maybe have a goal of having met once before the next full planning board meeting, not with anything to report, but other than that, we have met. Okay. All right. Yep. Another item?
Yeah, another item. Relating to an article that I've been prompted, I've read it, I've had some community members mention it to me from the Sun Journal relating to the projects that this committee has approved over the last year or so. It's great to hear it in the news, but I would love to see if, the board's recommendation, if we could have staff sort of prepare like a one-pager of like different things that we've culminated over the last year, whether that be like an annual report of just X number of projects this board have approved, or the X number of units. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but there was like a sort of highline of all the things that the City of Auburn has approved over the last year. But we don't have to do it for 2025, but just something forward for the next couple of years or however long we do.
Yeah, we do track all projects that have been approved. We'd be happy to put together a spreadsheet that shows all approved projects within the last year. We also keep track of all the building permits as well, residential and commercial.
Yeah, just like something to just have on hand, just in terms of numbers. I think that'd be perfect if that could be like a little letter, or like, we could break it down by commercial properties or whatever, but something that's easily accessible to the public.
Does that sound like something, Sam, that you could put together and perhaps send out with our next agenda?
Yeah, I can put something together and send it. Mm-hmm.
Bob?
Yeah, certainly support that, because I think it's always interesting. We meet, we either disapprove or approve, particularly the approvals, to have an update as to what's the progress on projects that we have approved. Have they progressed, or have some died? I think that would be important.
And the reasons why.
Exactly.
Like financial capacity. Yeah. Anything else? We have one other item, I guess. I have to turn the page. This is very small print. If by any chance we could make the print bigger for the next agenda.
Yes.
The City Council is working on a draft ordinance that proposes to strengthen protection of natural resources for solar and residential projects to inhibit projects that impact prime farmland soils, soils of statewide significance, and wetlands. Okay.
So there will be a special public hearing on February 19th. We do have most members who will be present at that meeting. So that will be where we bring the proposed changes, and the board will open public comment, review the changes, and then authorize those to go to the council. And the changes really pertain to additional protections in the ag zone for solar and for residential permits. So prohibiting development on prime farmland soils, and within wetlands and other natural resources.
So, in the thing that I just read where the word inhibit projects, that would, is that what you meant, or did you mean to say prohibit? Like you just said?
Yes, it would not allow, you would not be allowed to construct a solar project on prime farmland soils. I think the way the language is currently worded is, it says something like shall be discouraged from. It's a little more, it might be a little more open-ended, so we want to discourage anything from, any new solar from being on prime farmland.
Just solar projects?
And residential projects as well.
So there's a meeting on the 19th?
Yes, it would be a special public hearing.
I'm not here on the 19th. Will you be?
Yeah,
here?
they called me. I'm going to be there.
Hmm?
I'll be there. I was contacted.
People aware? All right. Good. Thank you for that. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor? Thank you.